Hello, everyone. Hello to everyone who's watching this recording, and to Kay, who is in the room with me here. Kay is one of our Highwire assessors, consultants, friends, and this session today, very exciting, is all about unpacking Standard 4.1. I know you know what it is. It is the Human Resources Standard, all about our people, all about our lovely people. So I want to just welcome all you lovely people who are watching this little webinar on the wire, where we do have fun every month collaborating and sharing and learning all about the Australian Service Excellence Standards. So if you're starting out or if you're getting ready for your accreditation visit, um, hopefully you find this valuable. I am on beautiful Biripi country and I want to acknowledge the First Nations custodians of this beautiful land. I am coming to you from Taree today, New South Wales, mid-north coast, and I want to acknowledge all of the traditional custodians, First Nations peoples of the lands on which you are joining us from today, and appreciate the diversity of Aboriginal cultures across Australia. We have been busy. We've been busy here at Highwire. Our lovely team is growing. We are welcoming 2 new Sydney-based assessors. Oh, yes. And so that's good news for all of our clients and potential clients, because we'll have a lot more support to offer and a lot more reach across the country. So that's exciting for us. We have been busy supporting organisations with strategic plans. It's that time of year. People are thinking about updating their strategic plans, and we are getting busy with bookings for governance training because there are some new boards around, and there are lots of people preparing for accreditation. So getting your governance in order is a important part of preparing for that, and compliance and quality in general. So that's been keeping us busy, and we've been helping some organisations with NDIS readiness as well. There are some fabulous Aboriginal organisations who are getting registered to provide NDIS services in their communities, and so our lovely Lisa has been helping in that space. So getting on with what we are going to cover today, I thought what we might do is have a look at the 10 indicators. There are 10 indicators or requirements that you need to be able to tick in order to meet 4.1, the Human Resources Standard. That's, I think, the most indicators of any of the standards. Kay might fact check me there, but I'm pretty sure that that's the most indicators under any particular standard. So there's a lot to it. But it's not challenging in that the requirements are quite explicit. So let's have a look at what those... Can you hear Molly snoring on the couch? There she is. She's having a good old snore. So if you're hearing something funny in the background, it's her. It's not me. And on the other side of me, I've got Onyx, the cat. See the Onyx there? Onyx doesn't snore. There you go. Just explaining. Here we go. Let's have a look at the 10 indicators. I'm nutshelling them. You know that I like to keep everything simple. So here we go. The first indicator is about recruitment selection of the right people. It's about making sure that they have the skills and capabilities to be able to look after the client's needs and to work in safe ways. So there's requirements in there around showing us that you are doing good screening, that you have a selection process, including things like reference checks, that you have an open, sort of accessible recruitment process. Yeah, so if you think that there might be barriers to access for potential employers in your organisation, you're showing us that you've, providing support, or that you're reducing those barriers, all about access and equity, isn't it? So you show us your recruitment process, your policies and procedures that are supporting that. And when we have a look at the HR files, when we come to your organisation, we'll see evidence of that in there, I'm sure. You need to, the second indicator here, so 4.1.2, is about induction. So showing us that you have a comprehensive induction to bring people into the policies and procedures of the organisation, most importantly, the ones that would help to keep them and everyone safe. And that you have a checklist that might support that, and that you regularly review it, because recently we've looked at some induction checklists and we've found things missing, like a discussion about infection control, with the pandemic. So those sorts of things there. Role descriptions are in place for every person. So when we have a look at HR files at your organisation, we'll like to see that every file that we look at has a role description in it that describes the requirements of the person in their role. That might be attached to a contract, but a role description is really important in order for people to know what's expected of them. A code of conduct that defines the expectations around behaviours. That you have defined and documented and explained clearly the rights that the staff member has. So that would be important, things like making sure that they have their Fair Work statement, that they understand what the Fair Work rights and responsibilities are for them under that piece of legislation. Yeah, and if they have, rights to grievance, that's explained. If they have rights to or eligibility for things like, EAP, if they have rights to supervision of some kind, those sorts of things should be included there. A commitment to equal employment opportunity is evident. Yes, so we would have a look again at any barriers to accessing your organisation for staff, and this has often come up. We have often visited sites where the access and egress for a person with a physical disability would be really challenging, such as stairs or, a few large steps to the building without a ramp. So, that is a compliance challenge for your organisation, because people should have a right to be able to access your building as a staff member. So that's something to really think about. And removing any of those barriers to employment that might be there. So thinking about principles of access and equity, what support are you providing that enables people to be able to get into your organisation, and once they're in, what support do they have to be able to, meet the requirements of the employment contract. Yeah. It's not just about us looking around and saying, oh yeah, you've got some different looking people here. but I think that's what some people think. Okay. And sometimes diversity in teams can happen in an ad hoc way. We would rather see that it's happening in a planned way. It's happening in a way that is strategic, or is in alignment with your sort of workforce development and the sorts of things you want to achieve in your strategic plan. So yeah, that'll connect with the diversity standard as well. Flexible work practices. How are you going with this? Flexible work practices. We'd really like to see that you have a policy in place that offers a range of flexible work practices, and that the staff can tell us that you are a flexible employer, and that things like being taking account of carer responsibilities, taking account of people's ability to work from home, to be able to adjust their hours to part-time, those sorts of things. performance review and development plan. This is very important. Now, please don't think that performance review means, oh, I've got to be able to show that we're having a 12-month performance review. The way that you review the performance of people in your team is wide and varied. And we will have a look at what is effective. Okay, so if you say to us, what we do is we have monthly one-on-ones, we have, a 3 monthly sort of more detailed check-in about sort of KPIs, or, have a look at the job description once every 6 months, or however you say you do it. We need to see that there is something in place where you are reviewing the performance of your staff, and that they get feedback. Ideally that feedback is two-way, but that's what it's about, isn't it? So the intent of the performance review is more important to us than the actual performance review, if you know what I mean. All right. So what we want to see, that there is some way that you're reviewing the performance of the team, giving feedback, receiving feedback, and a development plan is in place. So whatever personal professional goals that team member has would be documented. The ways that you're developing them to be able to meet the current requirements, but also the way that you are developing them to be able to support the future requirements. All right, so we want to see those documented, and we want staff to tell us that they feel like they're getting support for their personal and professional development. Okay, so that's important. That's a risk area in our view, because that's not often an area that's underbaked. So 4.1.8, write that down as an area of focus for you to have a look at. Direct supervision is provided to team members, to staff at all levels. So we would look at how the CEO is provided with support and supervision. We would look at how, managers, everyone, how they are given supervision in order to be able to get feedback about how they're doing, in order to for you to know that they're on track with any goals, KPIs, must-dos. All right. So particularly if there are clinical roles within your organisation, you might find that you have a compliance requirement to provide supervision in terms of that person's registration. Okay. So whether it's internal, external supervision, whether it's part of a qualification, credentialing, continuing professional development sort of framework, we'll look to see how that's done. And a 4.1.10 is about your mandatory training requirements. So what are your must-dos when it comes to training your staff? Well, you must induct them. So that's the first one. But some organisations have mandatory training around CPR. They have mandatory training around trauma-informed care. So if you receive certain funding, there might be certain requirements from the funder, certain regulatory requirements that say that staff must be employed at a certain qualification level. Okay, so you would need to be able to show us, if your funding says that, drug and alcohol workers are employed at a Cert 4 level, then you'll need to show us that they've got their Certificate 4 or equivalent, for example. If you do employ clinicians, it's likely that they will have to maintain some continuing professional development points associated with their registration, so you'll need to show us that. You might have identified some core training in your organisation, meaning sort of mandatory stuff, the must-do stuff. And so that might be first aid, that might be training on the client records management system, whatever you've determined is the must-do training in your organisation. We want to see that it's been undertaken. So we would like to see some sort of training register that shows us, yes, that you're tracking and monitoring that as a must-do. All right, so there's the 10 indicators that you'll need to meet, and some ideas about the sort of evidence. Always, always, always dive into your evidence guide, your service excellence evidence guide, and have a look at these sorts of examples that are there for you for evidence. Remember my caution about that evidence guide. It's not a checklist. All right. It really is just to prompt your thinking around the types of evidence that you might have. Don't go in there thinking, oh my goodness, we've got to have all these things. No, it's just a prompt. But it is a very, very helpful prompt. It helps you to interpret the requirements. Okay. So dive into your evidence guide, have a look at that. We are giving you some resources today. Oh, we're giving you so many resources. I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm just going to read out the resources that we've got for you. Bum, bum, bum. One little moment. Where is that? Here it is. Okay, this is what we'll be sharing with you. When you get a copy of this recording, or if you have already got a copy of this recording, you will see these resources listed underneath the video. So we've got from the Fair Work Ombudsman a self-audit checklist. So if you're wondering all the compliance requirements against the Fair Work Act, we have got a self-audit checklist for you there. So you can go through that and you go, yep, we do that. You can do that before we come, because we know what's supposed to be in your HR files. We'll give you a copy of the Fair Work statement we're talking about, though we assume you all know about that. We've got a handout there for tips for super effective one-on-ones. So this is one that I might use when I'm talking to middle managers about that sort of coaching practice, or that practice of regular check-ins or supervision. So you've got tips for one-on-ones there. So you've got a nice structure for a one-on-one conversation there that we're giving you. Have a look at that. You can change it any way you like. We are giving you our HR file audit checklist. We're giving you the list of things that we look for when we come in. So I suggest before your assessor comes, that you do that audit yourself. Hey, that makes sense. What do I always say? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. So have a look at what we will be looking for, and go through that yourself. We are giving you some flexible work practice templates. So there's a working from home policy, there's a flexible workplace policy. So there's some starting points there if you haven't already got a flexible workplace practice policy and procedure. And we are giving you a professional supervision agreement template. All right, because that would be a really sort of good practice collaborative way to go with the team, is to have a supervision agreement that says, you know, what both parties are agreeing to in relation to supervision. Okie doke. So there's a lot there for you this month. I want to finish off by having a look at what our HR system might look like, because we're hearing, aren't we? There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to looking after the team, looking after our human resources. So I've got a whiteboard that I prepared earlier, and we're going to have a little look at what a system around our HR might look like. Now, if you haven't heard me banging on about systems before, this is going to be really great for you. If you have heard me banging on about systems before, then this is a lovely refresher. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and bring up my whiteboard. Not that one. I want this one first. Do I? I might have to get Kay to play. All right, Kay, unmute yourself. Turn yourself on if you wouldn't mind.
I'm turned on. Here I am. What can I say?
I think that getting Kay to play is this wonderful idea. And I've got a little thing here that says systems are diced in 5 ways. So when we're putting together a system, and I'm suggesting that putting together a system is a good idea when you've got many moving parts. So instead of just saying, oh, have we got a document here and a process there, we suggest you have a look at it through the lens of a what a system might look like. We suggest you systematize it. Is that the word?
That is the word.
Systematize. I like them
Not
both.
systematize.
Systematize it. Let's systematize it. And so when assessors come to your workplace and they're looking to see whether you've got a well-functioning system around human resources or whether you've just got, ad hoc bits and pieces around the place, this is really what they're looking for. So a little word game here. The first thing they're looking for starts with D. K, any ideas what it might be?
You want me to shout out the answers?
I think shout it out.
The first one is documented.
It certainly is. Now, let me just work out how I'm going to, hang on, I know. I'm going to, this one. Here we go. Everything to do with human resources in your organisation needs to be written down. All the bits and pieces need to be written down. Thank you, Kay. Well done to you. The next one starts with I.
Is implemented.
She knows it. Look,
She
she's a
knows
systems
it.
thinker. Everything that's written down must be happening in practice. Don't let these two get out of step. Isn't that right, Kay? Because sometimes we go ahead and we do things, but we forget to document them. And sometimes we document things, but they're not fully implemented in
Forget to do
practice.
them, that's right.
So that's important, both of those there. What's this one, Kay? Starts with C.
This one is communicated, Marie.
It is, Kay. Oh, she's on fire today.
She's on fire today.
She's not letting anyone else answer.
Did my homework.
Everything that needs to happen around human resources, all those 10 things there that we just talked about, must be communicated to all the people who need to know and understand. All right. So if it's about induction, then we're communicating with the managers who are going to participate in the induction. If it's about mandatory training, then what's the way that we communicate the mandatory training that people need to undertake? All right. So all the ways that you communicate, all the things that you want to have happen around looking after your people. This one's very important. It's so important, I'm saving best for last, Kay. So what's this one here that starts with D?
That one's delegated.
It is. It's delegated. Every little part, every little moving part of our lovely HR system must be delegated to someone who knows how to do it and they have the time to do it. And they know it's their job. So the delegations are really important when it comes to HR, because in HR there's a lot of must-dos. There's a lot of legislative compliance, isn't there, around HR, keeping people safe. So it's a very big responsibility and it must be delegated to people who are capable. All right, so you're going to have delegations around who employs people, delegations around who does the referee check. You're going to have delegations around who's involved in the induction, who's involved in terminating people if they happen to breach that lovely code of conduct, right? Very important. So everything in the system, all the moving parts must be delegated, every single bit of it. All right. This one here is where we often see gaps because we think people don't often have time to do this. But it is very important for a well-functioning system, isn't it, Kay? What is it?
This is evaluated.
It is. So what we like to see is you've got some way of checking that this HR system is working really well. We've got some way of getting feedback from staff about, how was the recruitment for you? How was the induction for you? How are you going with the training? Are we giving you enough? So you will have evidence in your organisation if you bother to do the evaluation, if you bother to do the system monitoring, you'll have evidence of whether or not your HR system's working well. Can you think of what sort of evidence you might have that would tell you whether or not you've got a well-functioning HR system or not? What sort of evidence would tell you about the health of your system? Any ideas, Kay?
Staff survey?
Yes, you will have very low response rate, but worse, you will have a very low rate of, positivity in that survey. You'll have people who are telling you that they're not happy. So that's a really good system monitoring tool. What about the length of
Staff
employment?
turnover?
Yeah, staff turnover. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
one. And what about um, grievances? Mm. What about whether people sign up to do their mandatory training? Those sorts of things. What about some EAP sorts of things might even give you an insight into whether people are feeling supported. So evaluating that system and making sure that it's working well and identifying where your opportunities for improvement are, that is what we call CQI, isn't it? When we take action to improve things based on our system monitoring, that's called CQI. So continuous quality improvement. So there you go. That's that. Thank you very much, Kay. Well played.
Pleasure. Thank you.
There's a prize for you for answering all those
I'll
correctly.
look forward to that. Thank you, Marie.
And this is what it might look like if you were going to have some fun with your let's call this a systems gap analysis. Right. So what I do when I come to your organisation as an assessor, I really am looking to see whether or not you have got all those 5 things in place. So when it comes to HR, and just remember everybody, you can put anything in the circle here. This could be a system around finance. This could be a system around infection control, anything that's important to you. This could be a system around staff safety, cultural safety, anything. The same 5 things would apply, right? And what's helpful is when you do a systems analysis, so I've got these sticky notes here. And the sort of thing I would do is I'd say to myself, oh, how do we know that our HR system is fully implemented in practice? Well, we will have things like completed induction forms, won't we? Oops, I'm going to type terribly here. We will have our HR files. HR files will be complete, won't they? Our HR files will have all the, oh, hang on, my little thing's gone. Text. All right. So when you work with your team on doing a bit of a system analysis of your HR, you would brainstorm the sorts of things that would show that it is implemented in practice, right? You would sort of go over here and you'd say, oh, well, we have a HR policy and procedure. I'm having a bit of trouble with my functions today. HR P&P, that's where we document everything that happens. We might have a recruitment and selection policy and procedure. Oh, don't know what's happened there. So I would suggest you go around and you list all of the things that you could show to prove that you do have a well-functioning system in place around your human resources. What's the way that we communicate all the things to do with the HR functions, those 10 importantly for service excellence, but you might have a range of other things that you're doing to support people in your team. And so this is the way to systemize it. This is the way to systematize it, is to go around and list the sorts of things that would show that you've got this in place. Now, the interesting thing about a system is that if you cover up just one of those 5 circles there, let's say you covered up this one here, right? If you haven't documented your HR functions well, then you're weakening your system. You don't have a system. You've got some parts, but you don't have a system. If you don't communicate things well in your organisation about how to keep people safe, or you know all of those HR functions, those 10 HR functions that we talked about, if you don't communicate that well, you've got a weak system. All right, so there's only a system if all 5 parts are strong. All right, so do the analysis, sit with your team and do the analysis around the standard, because HR is a really important one. There's a lot of things here around compliance. There's always, not always, sorry, we do see that gaps often appear when it comes to HR, because you can see they're quite explicit, aren't they? Have you got a code of conduct? Do you provide supervision? Have all your staff got a job description? Have all your staff had some sort of performance review? Have all your staff got a professional development plan in place? All right, so that we are looking for very sort of specific things. So uh, that's good news for you, because it means you'll be able to check yourself. And we're giving you the tools to be able to do that. All right. So I hope that it's been helpful to have a look at those 10 indicators in terms of the types of evidence that we might be looking for. I hope it's been helpful to have a look at your HR standard as a system with those very important 5 parts. They all need to be there. Get rid of that. Thought I could make that a bit bigger for you, but anyway, close that whiteboard. So that's it. That is what I wanted to share with you today. The sorts of gaps we see, again, are the professional development planning, the list of mandatory training is not always clear. It's generally undertaken, but it's not generally documented. Uh, that can be a gap for an organisation, because once you document it, you have an ability to be able to monitor where people are up to with it. So if it's mandatory training, you want a way of knowing that everybody's done it, because less than 100% compliance is sort of not acceptable if it's mandatory. Is that right? So you want to have a list of the mandatory training and a way of monitoring that people have undertaken it. All right. We often see that where you run a service where people have to have minimum qualifications, so I might call this credentialing. You also need to have some sort of a system around monitoring people's credentials. So just as you would need to have something around monitoring whether people have their driver's license if you're requiring them to drive a vehicle, that people may have, had whatever your vaccination policy is, that people have had their vaccination and their boosters, whatever your policy is, some way of being able to see those compliance requirements around HR, that everybody's had their induction. Yeah. So, we find having a register that helps you to monitor that is the best way to go, regardless of your size, really. Regardless of your size, that would be helpful to monitor the must-dos, have some sort of a register. So yeah, they're the gaps we see. We generally find, the services that we work with are employing the very best people. So we rarely find that, we're having a look and thinking, well, who are these people that you've employed here? They don't seem to be up to the task. We never find that. We always find um, exceptionally strong teams, but to keep them exceptionally strong and to have a high performing team, those 10 functions become quite important, as does having a system around looking after your people, because it's a complex business, isn't it? Looking after people, keeping people happy, keeping people on board. So I wish you well with all of that. Please have a look at the resources, check them against the ones that you've got. There might be some opportunities for improvement that you can identify there. If you have any questions about any of the standards, please bring them to future On the Wire sessions. You know that we have them monthly. You know that we record them. You know that you're able to share these links with anyone in your organisation for professional development. So go for it. Go for it. And we'll see you next time on The Wire. Thank you, Kay. for being here with me, keeping me company on the
Thank
recording.
you, Marie.
Nice to have a real live voice here.
Pleasure as always.
Goodbye, everyone. Where's my record? There's my recording button. There we go. Smooth finish.